Hi guys, welcome back to another video in the Beginner's Mediumship series. I'm Medium Michael Mayo, and today we're going to be talking about possession, evil spirits, and attachments. So you'll want to stay tuned. When it comes to talking about evil spirits, and when it comes to talking about the spirit world in general, this is one of the things that comes up a lot. Oftentimes I'm asked, so what about the evil spirits? What about the scary negative spirits? What about the attachments and all of those things? Or aren't you afraid of getting possessed? And I hear these questions all the time from people, and the first thing that I think of is the fact that I really get really frustrated and annoyed with the media, because I feel a large part of what we now experience with the media portrays spiritual things as something scary. I don't know if any of you have seen some of those TV shows where they're going into haunted places and they're screaming every other minute because there's some sort of cold breeze or something touched them. It's all made for the drama. It's all made for that kind of thing. So this being one of the most commonly asked questions, I really kind of want to break it down where it is this all started from anyway. Why is it that we even have this concept of, this good and evil and this, scary sort of things? And the very first thing I would point out is that it largely comes from religion. Most of us live somewhere where there is some sort of either Abrahamic religion, Judeo-Christian religion, or some sort of spiritual practice that oftentimes has a undercurrent of, this battle between good and evil. We have to be mindful of this sort of balance between the two. And in my experience, it's actually been that kind of mentality that has created this sense of, you can't have good without the bad. This is something that I hear oftentimes with people. And personally, in my experience, that just doesn't seem to be the case. You can actually just have good. You can just have that loving experience. I feel very much that oftentimes this fear thing comes from a desire to control. And I think that that's something we've seen within, religious institutions within the past. And I think that the fear part of it really isn't the main thing. I think that comes from a lot of, antiquated belief systems that don't really apply today. The second area where I feel that we get a lot of this is the media. And this is one of the biggest culprits of kind of bringing this idea that there is something that we need to be worried about or scared about within the spiritual work that we do. The very first thing we can point to is movies like The Exorcist or any kind of, or The Haunting, and there's all kinds of, things where people think that possessions and things like that are a thing. A perfect example of this is going to be the shows that we see on TV where there's, they're going into a haunted place and they are playing this scary, creepy music, and people are jumping and screaming because, a cold breeze came by them and they freaked them out. I know that within the media, that's actually what they're trying to do. You don't tune into that because you're actually like, wow, let's find out, what is this reality? But rather, I kind of want to get creeped out. I kind of want to get scared. And that's what they're sort of playing on. And then the last area I would say that is a huge part of where we get this idea is just our own psychology as people. When we don't understand something, it becomes scary. Whether that's, within our interpersonal relationships as just people, but especially when we start to move into the area and the land of the unknown, something that we can't see, we can't touch, and it really starts to play on a lot of these sort of basal fears within us that this is something scary or bad. And as I go forward, I'm going to explain to you why I think none of these three things are actually important to what's truly happening with the spirit and the other world. So why do I not believe in this? Why, with all the things that are out there, both just the religious or the media or psychologically, why is it that in my experience I have not found this to be true? Well, that comes from the fact that in everything that I have ever done with the spirit, it has always come from a place of love. I have never, in any of my years of working, 14 years now at this point, I've never experienced anything bad, scary. I've had things touch me. I've had objects go sliding off of a desk. I've had all kinds of physical phenomena that I've experienced that has never led me to feel fearful. I think one of the biggest reasons why we start to feel fearful with this kind of thing is when we can't understand it, as I mentioned before. And I think that plays a lot to that psychological aspect of this. I feel that really the main place and the main source of where we actually get this idea that we have to be fearful or afraid of something going on in the spirit world is going to come through our perception. So I feel that whenever we are in a state of fear, everything that we're experiencing from the spirit world is going to have to pass through this filter that we have of fear. And if we have this filter of fear, it's very, very hard for us to see what's really going on. A good way to look at this is no matter what is going on with the spirit world, it always has to pass through our experience. If we are in a certain space, a certain mood, we have some sort of preconceived idea of how things are going to happen, it then gets messed up. It gets blocked or misinterpreted or misconstrued. You can even think of this in the sense of just being in a bad mood. Suddenly everything starts to annoy you, everything starts to bother you, just going through your daily life, something that wouldn't have bothered you in another situation. We can just take that now and take it to an even further place when you're starting to feel a sense of fear. So let's just say, for example, I'm doing something with the spirit and I all of a sudden start to feel a pressure upon my neck, just some sort of pressure. If I was in a fear state, I would interpret that stimulus as possibly someone choking me. But if I were to be in a neutral state, I could just see that for what it is and say, okay, there's a pressure upon my neck. But the moment that I start to become fearful, that's going to actually amplify that experience because now this fearful emotion is now getting involved there and then increases the likelihood that this is only going to expand. Suddenly, as I'm afraid, I'm now looking for other things that are going to be a threat or a fearful experience. Anytime that I have seen or I've heard of people having these scary experiences, I've always taken them back in time to revisit that and see, okay, if this wasn't what I'm fearing it was, what else could it have been? And whenever I have done that with people, they've almost always found the source and said, you know what? That actually wasn't so scary after all. And now that I look at it through that lens, you know, maybe it wasn't what I thought it was. This is why it's so important for us whenever we're working with the spirit world to come from a neutral place. We really have to look at our belief systems and why it is that we believe what we believe. It's going to be such a huge impact on what we're able to experience. The key with working with the other world is to be as neutral as possible, to not have an opinion so that you can actually experience and see things for what they actually are. That's going to give you a better understanding of what the spirit world is like in general. With that being said, I also have found in my experience that anytime I have actually reached out to the other world, my experience has only been from a place of love. I have only felt a sense of bliss, a sense of peace, a sense of closeness, a sense of connecting with this thing that is greater than myself. And through that experience, it's actually taught me really what the nature of the other world is. It's a nature built in a foundation of love. Why is this important with connecting with the other world? It's important because whenever we're wanting to connect, what we need is our energy to be nice and open. We need our energy to be open and out. And when you think about if we're trying to bridge between the two worlds, we need to raise our vibration. To raise our vibration, we need to feel this emotion that's going to make us expand, make us feel open. So imagine when you're feeling a state of love, when you're feeling just in that beautiful, happy, just loving space. What's the thing that your body does? You just kind of want to open up. You want to hug someone. You want to send that love out because you're just welling with this great feeling. This is exactly the kind of energy that will help our energy, our vibration to raise, because love is the highest vibration there is. Whenever we have fear, what is the first thing that our body does? It shuts down. It tries to protect. It closes itself down. This is exactly what happens with your energy. Because we know that energy follows thought, so too then does your energy respond when things become fearful. We can't actually make a connection with the other world in these fearful states, because what happens is our energy shuts down and closes down, therefore breaking the link between this world and the other. They cannot maintain that without an energy source. And therefore, any kind of spiritual activity or spiritual work requires us to be open, to be relaxed, to be in a very loving and open state. So therefore, any spiritual work that we're going to do is going to require us to be, at the very least, in a neutral state. But if we extend that power with the power of love, with the power of that devotion and desire to connect with the other world, they will be able to reach down and connect with us. If we have fear, if we have something like that happening, if we get scared, it's going to do two things: shut us down and also make us misinterpret what we're actually experiencing. Mediumship requires freedom. It requires us to be open and available to the other world. When we are in fear, we are closing ourselves down. So even if there was a possibility for the spirit world to do something that maybe was scary or negative, they wouldn't be able to, because of the inability for them to maintain that power, that energy that it would take to impact us in a physical way. So what about possessions? Obviously, there in history, we have many instances of where people feel that either they have been possessed or there's records of people being possessed. And one of the things that I really always point to whenever I talk about this to students or people who have these kinds of questions is that if you were to look at the circumstances around a possession, you'll often find that it is with a younger, usually somewhere around teenage sort of age, of a person in a very repressed society and or religious situation where they really can't let their feelings come out. What happens when we are holding in our energy, when we are really repressing things within us? That energy has to find a way out. And therefore, what ends up happening is sometimes we can be so repressed that it creates a sort of kinetic energy that needs to find its way out. And therefore, that's when we start to see things like poltergeist or objects moving and that sort of thing. It's not actually a spirit consciousness. All it is this energy that needs to be diffused. Another example of when poltergeist or that sort of activity is happening, we may interpret it that way, but that's actually not what's really happening. The spirit world can interact with us to get our attention. They can move things to get our attention. So rather than viewing it as something scary or bad, perhaps celebrate that and check in. Find out, why is this thing happening? The moment you give it a lens of fear is the moment that you're going to start to create the fear. And so really allowing yourself to observe this phenomena as what it is, a miraculous phenomena between the two worlds, and then discovering what is the reason for that. That's usually what we end up finding if there is actually a spiritual awareness or consciousness connected to this process. Another really important point regarding possession is with that age range that we're talking about, this is people that can oftentimes get very, very worked up. And when they have been in this very, repressive sort of environment for so long, there's a desire to act out. And when you have adults and people giving you attention after they have had, whatever internal turmoil that's going on with them, as soon as someone starts saying, hey, this is actually something outside of yourself, it sort of gives this person permission to then start acting out even more. And so in some ways, the belief of this even being a possibility actually exaggerates what a real challenge or problem might be. That may be something psychological, or that may be something that is a real challenge that is in there. But when you give it a lens and an avenue of expression, through this sort of fear-based place, it really doesn't help us to point to what's really causing the problem. This is why I actually find this concept of possession an actually really dangerous thing. And it's dangerous for a few reasons. It's dangerous not because of any bodily harm that's going to come to the person from a spirit, but dangerous for the psychological well-being of the individual who's being led to believe that this is actually what's going on. When we aren't able to figure out what the real problem is, and we're pointing over here and we're saying, yep, it's a spirit, it's an evil spirit, we're never looking at what the clues and the symptoms are really pointing us to. How are we then able to help someone if we are looking in the wrong direction? Oftentimes, these kinds of awarenesses of possession or experiences of possession may actually be something that's underlying in the individual, and this is the avenue they feel they're allowed to express it in. So that person never actually really gets the help that they need. This idea of negative spirits, even within the New Age or spiritual world, isn't new. There has always been sort of this two-camp place where some people believe that this is possible and other people don't. I have found that in my experience, there is actually no benefit in believing that this thing is possible. Whether you believe in this or not, it's not going to make a difference on your lived experience in any positive way. It's only going to be a negative way that this actually can impact you, given that all you're going to be doing is adding fear into your belief system. A very famous medium from the past called Gladys Osborne Leonard was once asked about this exact idea. And one of the things that she said, which I really actually find valuable, she says, if they exist at all, we actually, where we are, have more power to help them move from these lower states of being rather than them over us. What we have to remember is that communication between the two worlds, whether that's through physical manifestation or just mental impressions, requires energy. When we are of a lower energy, a lower vibration, we're actually have less energy. We're not able to utilize this energy in the same way. This is why when we have a very great sense of love or compassion and all of these kinds of feelings, that is a great strong vibration that empowers us. Therefore, it's impossible for these things, even if they did exist, to have enough power and energy to impact us in this way. So I have a very good friend, Miranda, who is very interested in science and energy and where the two meet with spirituality. And one of the things she mentioned to me was this law of perpetual transmutation. And in a nutshell, that's basically that any lower frequency vibration always gets transmuted by a higher frequency. So therefore, even if there were these negative spirits, it's through the power of this higher vibration that we could then lift and transmute this into a higher vibration. One of the greatest obstacles that I've seen with so many of my students when they're trying to develop their mediumistic awareness is trusting their experience. And when we have this level of fear about things that we shouldn't even be afraid of, it actually inhibits our ability to grow. One of my teachers, Eileen Davies, always says, your trust is the greatest gift you can give to the other world. And I feel that the more that we can get rid of this fear-based things, the more that we're able to trust the spirit and trust ourselves with that experience, and thereby deepening our connection, deepening our understanding, and being able to become the clearest, most accurate channel for the other world. Hi guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you learned something new today or you liked it, be sure to hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell. If you want to connect with me more, make sure to check out all my links below. Thank you, and see you in the next video.